Leaders from 7 important countries met. This meeting is called the G7 Summit. It happened in a beautiful place in Canada. Many important people were there. They came to talk about problems in the world. They wanted to find ways to work together. Normally, at these meetings, leaders talk for a few days. They discuss things like the economy, peace in different places, and how countries can help each other. People expected this meeting to be like the others. They thought the leaders would have long talks and make plans together. The air felt calm. Everyone was ready for serious but normal discussions about world matters. They sat at tables and listened to each other. They hoped for agreement on many topics. But something surprising happened. It was not planned. It changed the meeting suddenly. The change came quickly and unexpectedly. It was a big piece of news that everyone heard. It made the leaders and everyone else stop and listen. This news was very important and serious. The President of the United States, Donald Trump, made a decision. He decided to leave the G7 summit early. He would not stay for the last day of talks. This was very unusual. Presidents usually stay for the whole meeting. His early departure was the unexpected event. When people heard President Trump was leaving, they were very surprised. They felt shock. Many people asked questions. Why was he leaving? Was something wrong? Was it a problem at the meeting? Or was it a problem somewhere else in the world? The news created many questions in everyone's mind. The plans for the last day of the summit changed completely because President Trump was leaving. His early departure was the main topic of discussion now, not the planned talks. Everyone wanted to know why this was happening. 2. The big news. The big news came late on Monday. The White House made an official announcement. President Donald Trump was attending the G7 summit meeting. The meeting was taking place in Kananaskis, Canada. But the announcement said President Trump would not stay for the whole meeting. He was planning to leave one full day before the summit finished. This news was sudden and surprising for many people around the world. The reason for the president's early departure was very serious. White House officials explained that there was a quickly growing crisis in the Middle East. The situation there was becoming more and more dangerous. The problem was a conflict between 2 countries, Israel and Iran. They were having serious hostilities. Reports from the region told of military actions. Israel had reportedly struck several important targets in Iran during Monday night. Following these strikes, Iran responded by launching many missiles and drones. These weapons were aimed at cities and other areas in Israel. It was described as an unprecedented exchange of attacks. In Israeli cities, loud air raid sirens began to sound. The sound of the sirens was a warning of incoming danger from the sky. People in the cities had to find safe places, like shelters. News sources reported that this intense fighting was hurting and killing civilians, people who are not soldiers, on both the Israeli and Iranian sides. Just before he left the G7 meeting, President Trump used his social media account. He wrote a message that served as a strong warning. The message was directed at the people living in Tehran, which is the capital city of Iran. His message was very direct and clear. Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. He also wrote that the leaders of Iran were responsible for this situation. He called it a shame and waste of human life. President Trump repeated his strong belief that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. The White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, spoke to reporters. She clearly stated the reason for the president's decision to leave early. She said it was directly because of what's going on in the Middle East. She also specified that President Trump would leave the G7 summit right after the dinner with the other leaders that same evening. Leaving the important G7 meeting a day early was a significant action. It was a big sign that showed how urgent and important the Middle East situation had become for President Trump. He felt it was necessary to return to the United States quickly to focus on it. His attention was now fully on managing this dangerous international crisis. The sudden news about the president's departure changed the mood at the G7 meeting. The other world leaders understood the serious nature of the conflict happening far away. The world waited to see what would happen next in this difficult situation. 3. Trouble in the East. The problem in the Middle East became much worse. It was now a very serious crisis between two countries, Israel and Iran. The fighting started with Israel attacking some places in Iran. These were specific places, maybe military sites or important buildings. Israel launched attacks from the air. Then Iran quickly fought back. Iran sent many missiles and flying machines called drones towards Israel. There were many of these, maybe dozens flying through the sky. This was Iran's answer to Israel's attacks. When the missiles and drones came close to cities in Israel, loud sounds called air raid sirens started. The sirens were a warning. People in cities like Tel Aviv heard the loud noise. When the siren sounded, people in Israel felt very scared. They had to run and find safe places, like shelters or strong rooms, to protect themselves. This fighting was very bad. News reports started to come out about people getting hurt and dying. It was reported that people on both sides of the fight were hurt. Sad reports said that civilians were hurt. Civilians are people who are not soldiers. They are just regular people living in cities and towns. Soldiers also got hurt or died in the attacks. One report said that many people in Iran died because of the Israeli attacks. It said that over 200 people died over just a few days. Most of these people were civilians, not soldiers. Another report said that people in Israel also died. More than 20 people died in Israel because of the missiles from Iran. Some of these were civilians and some were soldiers. Because of the attacks, some people in Israel had to leave their homes. They left their houses and went to safer places. About 3,000 people left their homes for safety. Countries far away watched this with worry. For example, the country of China told its people who were in Israel to leave if they could, because it was not safe. The situation made people around the world feel uneasy. Even the price of oil in the world went up a little because of this trouble in the Middle East. The crisis was growing bigger and more dangerous every hour. It showed that the problem was now real fighting, not just words or threats. President Donald Trump left the big G7 meeting early because of this big problem. He said he needed to deal with what was happening in the Middle East right away. The sounds of sirens and the news of people getting hurt and dying showed how bad things were. It was a time of great trouble and fear for many people living in the East. The crisis continued to get worse. People hoped for peace, but it seemed very far away now. This was the bad situation that made the U.S. president go home to focus on the problem. The crisis was the main focus now for leaders in America. The attacks were happening often, making it a very difficult time for everyone in the region. The world watched, hoping the violence would stop soon. But the bad news continued to come. 4. What happened at the meeting? Before President Trump left the G7 meeting, he worked with other world leaders. He met with the leaders of France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Canada, and the United Kingdom, plus people from the European Union. A good result from the meeting for President Trump was a new agreement with the United Kingdom. He and the British Prime Minister announced a new trade deal. This deal was important because it was the first agreement for lower taxes on goods between the U.S. and another country, the U.K. President Trump also started talks for a similar deal with Canada. He met with Canada's leader. They talked about a new agreement for trade and safety. They agreed to try to finish these talks and have a deal ready within the next month, within 30 days. This showed President Trump's focus on trade during the meeting. But not everything at the meeting went smoothly. The leaders needed to agree on some important official statements. These statements were about different world issues, like how people move between countries, new computer technology called artificial intelligence, and other topics. The leaders had written drafts of these statements. However, the United States, represented by President Trump, did not agree with the words in these draft papers. Because of this, the statements could not be finalized and made official by all G7 countries. There was one specific statement about the serious situation in the Middle East. This was the crisis where Israel and Iran were fighting. The other G7 leaders wanted to make a joint statement about this. The draft statement said that Iran should not have nuclear weapons. It also said that Israel has a right to protect itself. But President Trump refused to sign this statement. An official from the U.S. government said that President Trump did not agree to put his name on this paper with the others. This meant that the G7 countries could not send one strong, united message about the crisis in the Middle East. The disagreements on this statement and other statements showed that there were different ideas among the G7 leaders. It was difficult to find full agreement. The people organizing the meeting even thought they might not be able to make one big final statement from the whole G7 group. This had happened before at a past meeting. President Trump's decision not to sign the Middle East statement came before he announced he would leave the meeting early. It highlighted the differences in how the G7 countries saw the growing problem in the Middle East. This lack of full agreement made the meeting harder for the leaders trying to work together on global issues. 5. Why is this happening now? The big problems between Israel and Iran did not just start at the time of the G7 meeting. They had been growing for some time. Before the recent attacks, President Donald Trump of the United States had spoken strongly to Iran. He wanted Iran to agree to a new deal about nuclear power. He gave them a specific time limit, a 60-day ultimatum, to say yes. He warned of serious consequences if they did not agree. When that time limit finished in the spring of 2025, there was no new deal. Then, Israel made a surprise attack on Iran on June 15th. News reports said Israel attacked important military places and sites that might be used for nuclear work, including a possible strike on Iran's broadcasting center in Tehran. Videos even showed news anchors reacting to a blast during a broadcast. Washington said Israel acted alone in this first attack. Iran was very angry about this attack. They said they would fight back against Israel. And they did. They launched dozens of missiles and drones toward Israeli cities overnight. The fighting became very bad very quickly. Air raid sirens sounded in many Israeli cities, like Tel Aviv. Many people were hurt or killed in this fighting. Reports from Iran said that at least 224 people were killed, mostly civilians, by Israeli attacks over 5 days. Israel reported that dozens of Iranian rockets hit near towns. This forced about 3,000 people to leave their homes. At least 24 Israelis, including civilians and soldiers, died. The human cost was high on both sides. Seeing the fighting get worse, some other countries tried to help. They wanted Israel and Iran to stop fighting and talk to find peace. Countries like Qatar, Oman, and Saudi Arabia were asked by Iran to talk to President Trump to get Israel to stop. There were media reports that Oman was hosting indirect talks between the U.S. and Iran. The United States also tried to talk directly. President Trump's team was looking for ways to speak with Iran's foreign minister. A possible meeting between a special envoy for the U.S., Steve Witkoff, and Iran's foreign minister was discussed. President Trump kept saying one thing clearly: Iran must never have a nuclear weapon. He repeated this demand, saying it was a shame that Iran refused to accept a stricter deal before the fighting started. The situation was also affecting the world economy. For example, the price of global oil started to go up by more than 2% because people worried about the fighting stopping oil supplies from the Middle East. Stock markets in other countries also opened lower. Iran said they had strong defenses and would keep attacking until Israel stopped its campaign. The United States sent more military ships like Aegis destroyers and missile defense systems like THAAD batteries to the region. U.S. defense officials said these were purely to defend American interests and support Israel's air defense. The U.S. said it did not start this fight, but would protect its people and its friends and allies. The reason President Trump left the G7 meeting early was because this dangerous situation was happening now. The crisis had been building since his ultimatum finished, and it suddenly became very serious with the large attacks and counterattacks. Many people around the world hoped the talking would help stop the fighting and find a way to peace before things got even worse. The future felt very uncertain for the region and the world. 6. Other countries speak. President Trump left the G7 meeting earlier than planned. The other leaders who stayed in Canada needed to talk about important world issues. The difficult situation in the Middle East was a main point for discussion. The leaders wanted to issue a statement together, showing they agreed on how to handle the problem. However, even before the crisis, agreeing on joint statements had been difficult for the G7. This became much harder when President Trump was not there. France's President Emmanuel Macron spoke about the situation. He said President Trump had made a suggestion to stop the fighting between Israel and Iran. This suggestion was for a ceasefire. Mr. Macron said he welcomed this idea. He told reporters that there was an offer for the sides to meet and talk. He hoped these discussions could lead to a ceasefire and then to bigger talks for peace in the area. Canada was hosting the G7 summit. Mark Carney, who was leading the summit discussions, told the other delegates that they would continue their work. He said that talks would keep happening, even though President Trump had gone home. The countries had been working on a paper together. This paper was a draft of what they wanted to say officially. The draft statement said clearly that Iran must never have nuclear weapons. It also said that Israel had the right to protect itself from attacks. Leaders from other European countries also shared their views. Germany's Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, said the G7 would confirm Israel's right to defend itself. But he also said they needed to find more ways to use diplomacy to solve the problem peacefully. Britain's new Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, said he was worried about Iran's nuclear plans. However, Mr. Starmer also said it was very important for everyone to try and calm things down and stop the fighting quickly. He stressed the need for de-escalation. Not all countries had the same opinion. Japan's view was different from many others. Japan's foreign ministry made a statement that Israel's attack was wrong. They called it completely unacceptable and deeply regrettable. This was unusual because G7 countries usually show strong support for Israel. Japan has kept connections with Iran, and it chose to voice its strong disapproval of the Israeli action during this difficult time. Without President Trump at the table, it was very hard for the G7 leaders to agree on a final, strong statement about the Middle East crisis. They could not agree on all the details and words in the draft paper. This meant the group did not issue a clear, shared message to the world about how they saw the problem and what should happen next. The plan for a full, detailed statement was effectively stopped without President Trump's approval. The meeting continued, but without one of the main leaders, reaching full agreement on sensitive topics like this was much harder than before. 7. America gets ready. President Donald Trump left the G7 meeting early. He flew back home to the United States. His plane went across the ocean to Washington, D.C. In Washington, people at the White House were waiting. A team of important people from the government gathered in a special room. This room is called the Situation Room. It is used when there are big problems. They were ready to talk with the president when he arrived. They needed to tell him everything about the serious problem in the Middle East. The United States military also started to get ready. They sent more ships to the sea near the Middle East. These ships can help protect the area. They also sent special weapons that can stop rockets and missiles. These are called missile defenses. One type of missile defense is called THAAD. Another type of ship sent is a destroyer. The main office for the U.S. military is the Pentagon. People at the Pentagon said why they sent these ships and weapons. They said it was to keep American soldiers in the region safe. They also said it was to help Israel protect itself from the missile attacks. The United States government made a statement. They said that America did not start this fight between Israel and Iran. But they also said that the United States will protect its own interests. This means they will protect American people, American soldiers, and important places and ideas for America. The military made sure American forces in the Middle East were ready. They changed their position to be more defensive. This means they were ready to protect themselves and others if needed. President Trump's team said America would do everything necessary to keep Americans and their friends safe. 8. What next? President Donald Trump, who is the current president of the U.S., and it is real, made a sudden decision. He left the G7 meeting in Canada earlier than planned. He said he needed to go back to America because of a big problem getting worse in the Middle East. This unexpected departure from the important meeting created many questions around the world. Some people strongly supported President Trump's choice. They believe that the most important job of a president is to protect his country and its people. For them, focusing on the growing crisis in the Middle East was the right and necessary action. They saw it as a sign of decisive leadership. They noted that he went straight back to Washington and met with his security team. The White House said he would get full information on the situation. The U.S. military quickly sent more ships and special defenses against missiles to the Middle East area. The Pentagon explained these actions were to keep American soldiers safe and also to help protect Israel. They stressed that the United States was not the one who started the fighting, but it would strongly defend its important interests in the region. They felt President Trump sent a strong message to those causing the trouble. But other people saw the situation differently. Many experts and leaders in other countries were worried. They felt that leaving the G7 meeting early hurt America's relationships with its important allies, the other G7 countries. These countries are America's friends and partners. When the U.S. leader left, it made some allies feel uncertain. They had planned important discussions and wanted to make joint statements together about world issues. Without President Trump, it was hard for them to agree on everything, especially on how to respond to the Middle East crisis. Critics said his leaving made America look unpredictable. This can make allies wonder if they can always count on the United States to work together with them on global problems. The crisis in the Middle East is serious not only for the countries fighting. It can have effects far away, like on the world economy. The region is important for oil. When there is fighting and uncertainty there, the price of oil often goes up. This happened quickly after the conflict got worse. Energy experts warned that if the fighting continues for a long time, oil supplies could be affected more, pushing prices even higher. This can make life more expensive for people everywhere. Stock markets in countries like Japan and in Europe also showed worry, with prices going down a little after the news. So, the future after President Trump's departure and with the crisis growing is very uncertain. It is not clear how the fighting will end. It is not clear how America's relationships with its G7 friends will be affected in the long run. And it is not clear how the global economy will react if the situation does not improve quickly. The coming days and weeks will be important for showing what happens next. Given everything that happened, what do you think was the biggest challenge for the remaining G7 leaders after President Trump left?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.